Is Spider-Man Homecoming the best Spider-Man movie ever? Stay tuned for my Spider-Man review. So yesterday I saw Spider-Man, and I have to say, for a person who is not a big fan of the Spider-Man movie franchise, I thought that this movie was amazing, and I think it's obviously the best Spider-Man movie so far. So this is going to be my review. I have a few spoilers that are going to be ahead, so if you're not looking forward to that, if you have not seen the movie, make sure you cut out right now. Alright, let's go with my Spider-Man review. So I thought that one of the reasons why this was such a good movie is because it's a very well-rounded movie. From top to bottom, it has a great script, it has a great cast, there's great acting, there's great action scenes, it's well-timed. The third act, which I think is one of the most important acts of a superhero movie, does not drag on forever and ever and ever. And how I'm going to talk about this is that I'm going to talk about the individual actors' performance and what they brought to the table, because I really think that was one of the things that made this movie so great. So obviously we have Tom Holland as our new Spider-Man. He debuted in Captain America Civil War, so we have already seen him in action in the MCU, but he has his first standalone movie now, and I thought he did a fantastic job playing this character true to the comic. And what I mean by that is that we haven't seen a lot of Peter Parker being how he is in the comic book. In the comic book, he's a much funnier character, he's a much wittier character, but with the other versions of Spider-Man that we have had, they have had qualities that are not like the comic book character at all. Tobey Maguire was kind of a brooding Spider-Man. Like, he smiled some, but he wasn't cracking jokes or anything like that during his battles. Same thing with the Andrew Garfield character. I always felt like it was a little cocky, and that kind of bothered me. That's not really what Spider-Man's about. And in this movie, what is awesome is that as the arc of the story goes, you're seeing Spider-Man develop into Spider-Man, and that was amazing to watch. He doesn't have it all figured out yet. Even when he's doing good, he's still kind of messing stuff up, and so it was really great to see that throughout the entire film. That, along with the fact that you actually believe that Tom Holland is a high school kid, makes this more interesting. With the other Spider-Man, I didn't really feel like they were high school kids. I didn't feel like they were young. I felt like they were younger adults, especially with Tobey Maguire. But with Tom Holland, he goes to this high school, he has his nerdy high school friends that he hangs out with, and so you actually believe this character is an adolescent superhero who is just trying to figure out life in every way, shape, or form. And Tom Holland does a great job with the comedy. He does a great job actually being Spider-Man as well, and his interactions with the different characters, Ned, Tony Stark, are amazing to watch. So I really enjoyed his performance. So the villain of this movie is the Vulture, and the Vulture's story arc was actually really interesting to me as well, because he's not one of those villains who is just evil to be evil. At the beginning of this movie, what ends up happening is that he gets a project taken away from him by the government, and he apparently spent a lot of time trying to get this deal, and then the government just snatches it from under him. And what ends up happening is that he blames Tony Stark for this, because Tony Stark is part of the government division that helps clean up disasters after superhero battles. So the project that Michael Keaton's character, the Vulture, had was cleaning up New York after the whole events in Avengers 1. So he gets that taken away. 8 years later, what has happened is the Vulture has developed, with the technology that he has found from Avengers 1, he starts developing weapons and has been selling these weapons underground to different villains of New York and building weapons for himself. So that is his story arc, and the reason why he is building these weapons is that he simply wants to make money to support his family, which you see how that ties in later in the film. So it's this interesting dilemma that you have with this character, because you kind of feel some empathy, some sympathy for him. You don't just straight up hate him like you would a Joker type character or a Thanos type character. You don't just straight up hate him because this person is just pure evil. There's some motivation of good behind this character, so you really end up kind of empathizing with him. But in the end, obviously, you have to see this character taken down because he's still out there harming people and killing people and selling weapons. So the next two characters that really stood out for me were Ned and Zendaya. Those were probably my two favorite characters in the scene. They're the two characters that definitely made me laugh the most. Ned has this whole scene with Peter after he finds out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He has this whole scene where he's asking Peter about his powers, and I just cracked up laughing through this entire scene because he's just fanboying out. He just wants to know everything he can do. He even asked Peter at one point, he's like, can you summon an army of spiders? And Peter's like, no. And I was laughing so hard through this whole part. In these other movies, Peter has friends, but you still feel like he's a loner. You don't feel like the camaraderie is real based on the story arcs that happen in the other Spider-Man movies. But with this, you absolutely have Peter and his best friend who are trying to figure out what to do in this situation with these different bad guys and these different villains. It was very interesting to see Ned take on this like Alfred helping Batman role, or Felicity Smoke helping the Green Arrow role. And I thought that was a great thing to bring to the character because it kind of looks like they're developing, there's going to be this like Team Spider-Man that Peter has that will be different than the other movies. He has a bunch of intelligent, smart friends that go to his high school, and I think that they're kind of setting it up where there are going to be these different people and different friends helping him throughout his journey. He's not going to just be going it alone. So I thought Ned's character was great. I'm really looking forward to see how they develop that relationship in the future. So the next character was played by Zendaya. We end up finding out at the end that this is going to be the MCU's version of MJ. So MJ is Mary Jane. She was portrayed in the past by Kirsten Dunst in the first 3 Spider-Man films. So they've been teasing who she's going to be for a while. Like, they didn't know exactly. Obviously, there's stuff that came out that she wasn't going to be quote-unquote Mary Jane, but she ends up being, her real name is Michelle, and she's like, my friends call me MJ. So we find out that she's going to be that character in the MCU. So obviously they tease this a little bit that maybe in the future she might be a love interest of Peter's. So we'll see where they go with that. But what was amazing about her character is that I felt like her character out of all these adolescent kids was the most in touch with what's going on in the real world. She is the most quote-unquote woke character of all the kids at this high school. And she says a couple things that make you realize, oh, this is a smart girl, not just someone who has been looking and reading books and can program and can do all this computer stuff. She very much is aware of the things that have happened in the world and are happening in the world. There's this scene at the Washington Monument where she is at the bottom of the monument, and this is after her and a bunch of her classmates have won this science decathlon. And all of her classmates go up into the Washington Monument, and her teacher walks by and is like, hey, are you not going to go up? And MJ says, without skipping a beat, she's like, no, I don't believe in celebrating a monument that was built by slaves. So it was interesting to see something that real be put into a Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man is a children's character. One of the reasons it's been so successful is because a lot of kids go and watch movies like this. So to see such an adult topic be brought up, even if it was just a one-liner, was really cool. And she does that a couple other times in this movie, and I really appreciated them bringing that kind of intelligence to one of these high school characters. So then you had Peter's mentors, and Peter's mentors in this came in 3 forms. There was Donald Glover's character, aka the Prowler. There was Aunt May, and then we had Robert Downey Jr., aka Tony Stark. So Donald Glover had a smaller piece in this. He has been tied to Spider-Man for quite a while for different reasons. There was a push for him to play Spider-Man before Andrew Garfield in the Amazing Spider-Man series. That didn't happen. But now what's happened is he plays the Prowler, and the interesting thing about his character is the Prowler is actually the uncle of Miles Morales, who is the other Spider-Man in the Spider-Man universe. So he plays that character, and what ends up happening is that he has a couple altercations with Spider-Man where he is trying to buy these guns from the Vulture's men. And what ends up happening is being like, no, I don't need guns of this power. I don't need anything that's going to be this devastating. And Spider-Man intervenes and ends up saving the Prowler's life. So what happens from there is Spider-Man ends up finding the Prowler and trying to confront him. He does a really bad job of interrogating him, and the Prowler's like, I need to give you some advice because you need to get better at this part of the job if you're going to do this job well. He sees that Spider-Man is something that could be necessary for the neighborhood and he could do some good. So he ends up giving him some advice there. I feel like this is something that's going to continue, that we will see Donald Glover in some future movies. Obviously, if we get a Miles Morales in the MCU, which I think that we will, I hope that we will, we're going to see more of Donald Glover's character in the MCU, so I really hope that that happens. I thought he did a really good job portraying this whole character, so I'm looking forward to see what they do with that in the future. In terms of Aunt May, she was the character in this that is trying to help Peter become just a better human. Nothing to do with superheroes. She doesn't know that Peter is a superhero until the very, very, very end of the movie. Literally, like, the last line of the movie is hers seeing Peter in the costume, and she goes, "What the?" and then it cuts out. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that in the next part of the movie. I think she'll have a little bit bigger role. But in this movie, she didn't have a lot of screen time, but she had enough in certain situations where there was some concern about Peter that she was showing, and she just wanted to make sure that he was keeping his head on straight and following the right path. There's a scene in this Thai restaurant where there's talking and she's just trying to make sure that he is okay. And then the other big scene is at the end of the movie when Peter comes to her for advice about this homecoming dance that he finally has a date to. So there's this whole adolescent, teenage, I'm freaking out about asking a girl out dynamic, and he comes to his aunt, and it's really interesting to see that whole situation develop. So I thought that her character was really, really great for this movie, much different in my opinion than the other movies, because in this she seems like more of a mom than in the other movies. She seemed like a grandma because there was such an age difference. Like, this version of Aunt May is much, much younger than in the other Spider-Man franchise movies, so it was interesting to see that. The only thing that I didn't like about her being much younger is that they keep making jokes about her appearance, and I think that that's just a little overplayed now. Obviously in Civil War, we had this joke where Tony goes something about your unusually attractive aunt, and I was like, okay, it's done once, let's leave it there. We don't need to do it 2 times in this movie. So that was the only thing that I found was a little bit annoying about her character, but that's not even about her character. That's just somebody putting in lines that I felt were unnecessary. So other than that, I really enjoyed her character. So then our last mentor character that we have is Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. So obviously Peter is really excited about being able to work with Iron Man. He tells everybody, all of his friends, that he has this Stark internship, which is basically, he thinks, is his trials to like becoming an Avenger. And so throughout the whole movie, that's what he's telling his friends is an excuse for disappearing all the time, because he's constantly disappearing in the middle of class or the middle of competitions and things like that. So it was really interesting to see that dynamic between Tony and Peter, because Tony is trying to be this kind of tough coach. Like, you want to say that he's kind of being a dad figure, but I don't really feel like he's being a dad figure. He feels like, to me, like I had coaches back in high school and in college who were like this, that were helping me develop. Sometimes they had to be understanding and empathetic, and then sometimes they had to be hard-nosed, in your face, and that's what Tony really does in this movie for Spider-Man. Also, along with that, I mean, we get a good performance from Robert Downey Jr., but we're not getting a movie that is Iron Man with a little bit of Spider-Man. This is a Spider-Man movie, and it has the perfect amount of Iron Man. We don't get a lot of scenes with Tony Stark actually in the suit. We really only get one, and that is not even that big of a scene. He's not fighting off bad guys or anything. He's just helping, trying to salvage a situation that Peter couldn't handle on his own. But he's only briefly in there. It's not something that lasts for, you know, an entire act. It's not something where he comes in the third act and saves the day. So that was really awesome to me, how they used his character to help with the story, but did not oversaturate this movie with Iron Man. Obviously, Robert Downey Jr. does a fantastic job, as he has done with the Iron Man character in the MCU. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes with his story arc in the rest of the MCU, especially after the events of Captain America Civil War. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. So in all in all, I really enjoyed this movie. It was a perfect amount of humor, it had a great story, had great action sequences, and the actors did a fantastic job. It wasn't too funny. That was one of the things that I kind of had a problem with Guardians in the Galaxy, is that with these movies, I'm not really looking to go and see a comedy. I want them to be funny. Like, I don't want to see a Batman v Superman where all that Superman does is scallop people and then fly off, because that makes a great movie. Thank you, Zack Snyder. Like, I don't want to see that. I want to see there be some humor, it be a little bit light, but also be serious at the same time. So I thought they did a really good job balancing this movie. All the actors did a fantastic job with their parts. Kevin Feige and the people at Marvel know what they're doing. They're doing awesome things. I cannot wait to see Thor. I cannot wait to see what happens with this in the Avengers Infinity War. They tease so much stuff. We had Pepper Potts in at the end. I couldn't believe that happened. It looked like they were teasing the Iron Spider suit. It looked like that's what that is. I hope it's the Iron Spider suit. I really do, because that would be an awesome thing to see in Infinity War. Obviously, we had the Miles Morales Easter egg and things like that. They're doing a lot of amazing stuff with this movie, so I'm looking forward to see what they do in the future. But let me know what you guys thought. Let me know who your favorite character was. Let me know what your favorite scene was. Let me know what you thought about the movie overall, how it ranks in the Spider-Man movie universe. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm going to be putting out some new videos this week. We got another Boldly News coming out. I'm going to put up my first Rushmore video this week, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be really interesting. I'm going to be talking about science fiction captains, fantasy captains, who I think are the best for. So stay tuned for that. Once again, like and subscribe. And I'm signing off here. My name's Oscar Hampton. Later days.